Twitch is actually twitching. So what we're going to do today is talk sort of a couple of different things. And let me see if I can get the chat in here. Where is the chat? Sam, hopefully you're there. I can't see the Twitch chat on my iPad here. I don't know why it's not showing it to me. Oh, there it is. Okay. So yeah, so Sam, hopefully you're there. All right. Anyway, so wanted to talk a couple of quick details about the tile map that I'd forgotten to mention, although hopefully it was pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go into assets here, and I just loaded Calvin's level here, or something that he made, just for sake of demonstration. So we've got this tile map, and you see how a bunch of the blocks have kind of that pink tinting to them? Okay, so what does the pink tinting mean? Yeah. Yeah, it's classified as a wall, which means that the player cannot go through it, right? So it obstructs their movement. Whereas in this case, you see there's also a lot of other tiles that are not highlighted pink. So all that purpley stuff up towards the top, those guys are tile mapped things, but not obstruct the player, right? So this is how you can have a background, for example, or you could have built like a house or something, I don't know, right? We've also got the ladder there, which actually is kind of cool. Did you program in? This and go into ladder climbing mode, and that's okay. Point being, you have the option to make any block on your tile map either obstruct the player or not obstruct the player. Okay, and in particular, and the reason I picked Calvin's is because one of the issues that he ran into last time, and we talked about, was you see how these death blocks there are highlighted. Okay. The first level. What I did here was I deliberately unhighlighted one of them and left the other one highlighted. Okay, so what what he had happen last time was that he could walk over the death block and your character didn't die. Okay, well, why did that happen? Can you overlap something that you can't go through? No. Okay, and the way that the tutorial had you do the death block was the death blocks were not solid, and if you touch them and then keep going through them, now you're overlapping, now you die, right? But if there's just a single block like that is surrounded by other things that you can't walk through, then it would be the case that you could just walk over the thing, because touching it and overlapping it are different things. Okay, so we ended up reprogramming it to, if you touch or overlap, then die, and it's a death block. Okay, but we wouldn't have had to do that if we had just made the death blocks not not obstruct the player. Okay, so right, so that we just fixed that a different way, but that we could have done it a second way. Okay, okay, so there's that. Um, Okay, the other thing I want to mention, you can turn on or off the overlay display, right? Um, you can clear it if you're in wall mode, and then you use the eraser. You can be like, okay, I want to make that one um, not obstruct the player, or whatever, right? So you can undo it or change it. Now, the other cool thing, though, and this is more of what I wanted to talk about, was, let's see, go back to the blocks. Okay, if I go to, I think it's under game, no, scene. Yes, okay. So there's all the stuff in the scene chunk. Okay, and you guys used a lot of these things, for example, to spawn all the ghosts, right, or enemies or whatever at various places along the in the tile map. But there's a couple of things that you can do, right? You can tell sprites to go to specific coordinates in the tile map. Okay, now I should be clear, the coordinate system for the tile map is different than the coordinate system for the screen display. Okay, does that make sense first off? What I mean there? Yeah, yeah. So you could make it, for example, that like let's say a ghost, he just sort of hovers in a circle in a particular area along the tile map, whether or not he's on the screen being displayed. Okay, so the tile map coordinates are relative to the grid of the tile map that's separate from what's on the screen. Okay, so you can put stuff at specific numerical coordinates of your choosing. You can put stuff at specific, on top of a particular looking block. So this is how you guys did the enemies, right? Is you spawned an enemy on top of one of the exclamation mark blocks, right? And that was sort of how you generated them. There, it sort of defaults to random, but you could also do it on a one-for-one basis if you wanted. But these two things here are these two blocks, that the one I'm highlighting and the one right underneath of it, are kind of the cool things that you could use, because what this means is that the tile map is not a static object. It can be modified during the game. Okay, so you can say for a particular tile map coordinate to turn the pink highlighting on or off, basically to make it an obstructable wall or not. Okay, and separately, you can change what object is, or what tile is at a particular place on the tile map. Okay, so does that make sense what we could do with those two blocks? Okay, the better question, why would we want to do that? Or what ability would this give us? How could we um, apply those two things? Bueller, you're supposed to say he's not here today.
He's not here today.
Yeah, okay. You guys have all seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
He's sick.
Yeah, he's sick. Sick. Now, why would it be kind of cool to be able to change the tile on a tile map and turn on or off the obstruction? Yeah.
If you feel like a power up, then the power up's like you can run through part of the map and get through faster.
Or even just a door,
Yeah.
right? So you could have like a tile that's a door, and by default, the art for it is a closed door. And then let's say you get a key, or you push a button somewhere, okay? Then you can say, all right, I push this button, and the door tile over there is going to go from the closed door image to the open door image, and I'll change that grid to be walk-throughable instead of obstruct the player, to so that the door is open, right? Well, great. You now have a Zelda game. There you go. Right? That's maybe a bit of a leap. But I mean, it makes sense, right? That this is how you would do sort of door puzzle dungeon kind of crawler mechanics, or to change the like, let's say the button. Um, if you wanted to say there's a like, let's say there's a lever, right, and the lever can either be up or down. Well, changing the tile from the up lever to the down lever is an art change that would then correspond to hopefully something else in the game, like a door opens or closes or whatever. I don't know. Okay, so does that kind of make sense? Yeah, like, hey, we can do some cool stuff with that. We? No. Question? Monsieur Rogers? Vous avez une question? No. Okay. Okay. So Gucci? Yeah. All right. Sweet. You can also check, these are sort of Booleans, right? So this is how we, Calvin and me solved the problem of, okay, we can check if the tile to my underside is a death block, then kill me or not, right? This we used that same idea for the enemy stuff, right? So what happens if you touch an enemy from the top? It's different than touching it from the sides or from the bottom, right? And you could do this. We talked about this last time, right? Where you could do that for like a coin coming out of the exclamation mark block or whatever, right? Okay. Okay. So does that kind of make sense? You also have camera control. So in the most cases, you like for the side scroller, you use camera follow my sprite. But you could, for example, temporarily move the camera to be somewhere else and then have it come back to my sprite, right? So this the Zelda game on the Nintendo Switch, the one with the flute. Show me Picard's flute. No, Family Guy when he's on Family Feud. Oh yeah, that was okay. Never mind. That one's pretty. Yeah, I will. Um, well, okay, you won't be able to hear the audio though. I can put on closed captioning though. All right, let's see. Well, okay, let me disconnect my audio for a moment, or change the output to the speakers. So let's do this. Oops. We'll change the output to the MacBook Pro speakers, and then I'll crank the volume way up.
All right, Griffins, here's your chance to win the game. Name something you'd like to receive as a gift. A dead squirrel. Money. All right, good. Well, Richard, my family seems to think money's the way to go, so I'm going to go with the flute that Captain Picard played, first in his imagination and then in real life, in the episode The Inner Light from Star Trek The Next Generation. What? No, you said money. No, me, Picard's flute. I was in the survey. Can you believe it? We're going to the bonus round. All right, Griffins, here's your treat.
Huh? Yeah. I mean, it's Family Guy, right? So okay. So anyway, the reason I mentioned Breath of the Wild, just because that one popped into my head of um, there's situations where you're in the dungeon and you're trying to solve a puzzle or something, and let's say that you flip a switch, and then the camera pans over to a door, and the door opens, and then the camera pans back to you, and you get control back of the character. So like a cutscene kind of thing, right? Well, you could do that, right, with this sort of control. Okay. I put up Zelda here. I was talking about one thing with the previous class, but the about the tile maps, right? Is that so? If you were to make like, well, since we just did the platformer, what happened when you went from one level to another, right? You changed the tile map. Well, you could conceivably change the tile map back, right? And what would be a good example from Mario where you did that? Huh? Yeah, exactly, right. So in the very first level of Mario, right, you go 3 or 4 pipes in, down, and you can go down the pipe, and now you're in that underground area, and you get the coins, and you do the stuff, and then you go back through the pipe, and you come back out, and now the tile map has been restored to the overworld one. And when you come back out, you say, okay, put the player at this coordinate on the tile map to be at the top of the pipe, the exit pipe rather than the entrance pipe. Okay. Um, Okay, so does that make sense, right? How you could use that? You could also use this for let's say a Zelda kind of game, or Pokemon even, right? So you guys all played. Who did not play one of the Pokemon games when you were a kid, like the on the Nintendo or something? Okay, a couple of you. Did you guys ever play Zelda? Yeah. You know what I should have done at the beginning of the class is have you guys list every console or computer system you have ever owned and the games you've played on them. Be a big list, right? Okay. But all right. Anyway, so in Zelda or Pokemon or Final Fantasy or something like that, you have an overworld, okay, and you can go around and walk around the overworld, and that could be a really big tile map, right? So the tile maps, did you guys notice that you could set their size to be, any number of rows and columns that you wanted? Did you notice that? Ah, okay. Well, it's a good thing we brought that up. So let's just have a peek ski at the tile map ski. Right? So you see where it says tile size 50 by 12? You can change the size of it. Okay. So you see a really big one, or several really big ones that you could use for like an overworld kind of thing. Um, and then let's say you go into a dungeon and then you switch to a dungeon map. I mean, hey, you could even do something where it's overworld is top down view, dungeon is side scroller, right? That's completely possible. In fact, the Mario Brothers 3 on the original Nintendo did exactly that. Many of you guys have played Mario 3. Yeah? Who's never played Mario 3? All right. It's a good thing we have YouTube because this class would be a lot harder.
I think I played it on my Game Boy.
I think I like the outline.
All right, so here's what it looks like. Believe me, this game was freaking awesome when it came out. There was even a movie. Okay, it's going through it here in this. It'll start here in a second. There we go. Okay, so you got to pick whether or not it was going to be a single player or multiplayer game. Which multiplayer is sort of a misnomer because it really just meant that you took turns between Mario playing and then Luigi got to play. And if you died, then it moved to the next term. Okay, so. All right, top down overworld, side scrolling in the right. You could totally make those changes, right? Because what really made the difference between side scroller and top down? Hmm? What?
The level it was on, essentially.
Well, yeah, okay. So side scroller versus um, what tile map you have displayed, but then also what's a wall, what's not a wall, but also whether or not you have gravity on or off, right? Well, we talked about that last time. You can set the gravity on or off, and you'd want it on in a situation like this where you're in a side scroller mode, and all this is very annoying. Uh, Off when you're in the world map mode. Okay. And then I think there's a pipe in this one too. So,
There's a way you can get behind one of those.
huh?
There's a way you can get behind one of those barricades.
The POW button, right? Yep. And then there's right, different tile map. music changes. You guys can't hear that. Okay, come back to a different tile map. Okay, and then the card thing is what they did instead of the little flagpole from the original. But then, okay, you're now back to worked for the difference. Dang it, pause already. Okay. It was a freaking awesome game when it came out. So, okay, Gucci, get the idea, right? So lots of cool things we could do there. And that the tile maps are not static in the game. Now that said, if you restart the game, your tile map would revert to its base state, right? So whatever the art says. Although I suppose if you were really clever, you could do some stuff to have a persistent world. Okay, Gucci? Yeah? All right, so next thing, let's talk about Omeka. First, okay, but if you didn't get the invitation, I had to make you guys all admins because that will give you the ability to edit things created by somebody else, which right now is not really relevant. Okay. And so don't be a douche and like delete somebody else's stuff. Okay. All right. That said, Omeka, the idea here is it's kind of like a digital art museum. Okay. So in an art museum, you have items, you have collections, and you have exhibits. Okay. So what's the difference between all of those? What would an item be in an art museum situation? For example, just this painting. Okay. This particular painting is an item. And presumably, if you have an art museum, you have lots of different paintings. Well, each one is a different item. Okay. Then you can have collections of items. So, for example, you could say, I have the collection of Picasso paintings. Okay. And I have the collection of Roman statues. And I have the collection of uh, face masks from this country or whatever. Okay. And then you could have an exhibit, which would be okay, in this room over there in the museum, we have 2 Picasso paintings and some masks and some thises and some that's, right? Over there in that exhibit. And conceivably, if you have 500 Picasso paintings, not all 500 Picasso paintings are in your exhibit at once. Maybe they are if you're doing a special exhibit on Picasso, okay, but you know, museums rotate what they've got up on because what's the whole point of that? What do they want to do? What do museums want you to do? And come back to pay more money to see the stuff, right? To see different stuff. Yeah, but not necessarily. I mean, we like, for example, our art museum over in the Fine Arts Building. Do we charge money for that? No. I mean, I guess we do in the form of tuition, but in a sense, right? Right. But you could walk in there and it's going to be different art every year, partly because we, you know, what's most of the art over in our space going to be? Stuff that's made by you guys, right? And that changes from year to year because, you know, we keep educating you guys and the new freshmen show up. Like they get younger and younger every year. I don't know what's going on. Or rather we get older and older. So anyway, okay, so what you guys are going to do, and let's talk about an item. Okay, so let me just go here, and I'm going to as a sake of example, right? So the different data that can be associated with a platformer is going to be what's its name, what's the subject of it, what's a description of it. The description would be the thing that appears on the little plaque that's underneath the painting. You guys know that story, right?
That was Van Gogh.
Ah, good. I tested the last class too. Van Gogh was the dude with the ear, not Picasso. Um, Bazinga. Right. Okay. Anyway, so he's got a little description. The creator, in this case, it was Thomas. Source, not relevant. Publisher, also not relevant. Date, he could put the date that he did it. Contributor. So the difference there would be, in this case, you guys are both the creator and the contributor. Okay. But if, let's say, you worked for the art museum, you would be the contributor, and Picasso would be the creator if you were making this little item entry to correspond to a particular painting. Okay, does that kind of make sense? Yeah. And then there's a whole crap ton of stuff underneath this that's not really relevant to us. Although language, for example, that actually could be relevant. What would be two correct answers for what the language is? Um, yeah, Sam, the audio problem, it's actually on my end. My AirPods keep disconnecting and reconnecting, and I don't know why they're doing that. It's driving me crazy. Um, Yeah. So, what language would we put there? Could we put there? Yeah. Yeah, JavaScript, Python, C++, whatever programming language we're using. But of course, English would be also reasonable because, I mean, unless you want to write your game in French, uh, extra credit or credit plus plus. No. Um, you know, okay, type, identifier, coverage, alternate title, blah, 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 blah. So a lot of this is not really relevant. Copyright, there's access rights, a lot of this is license. A lot of this stuff is not really relevant to us, but there is one thing I thought I would point out here. Accrual method. Just having to keep up with that sort of thing. So it was actually about an art theft case. And some people were suing the government of Germany in U.S. court. That's the part I'm still a little confused why they were bothering, but um, and it was basically a Nazi art looting kind of case. So early on in the Nazi regime, Goering and other people would go around and they would buy, air quotes, art from people. But the buying might involve like, hi, I'd like to buy these paintings from you. Pay no attention to the three SS officers that are standing behind you with their guns pointed at your head. And yes, I know that this painting is worth $1 million, but I'm going to give you $10,000 for it. I think that's a very fair price. Wouldn't you say, SS members that have guns pointed to his head, right? So, yeah, pretty sketchy kind of provenance for how the art changed hands to, in this case, the Nazi regime. But then the question is, okay, in the suit, right, whether or not they could get it back. The stuff, but what I don't understand is why this was a Supreme Court case, considering the art's not even in the United States, it's in Germany, right? So it's like, why are we deciding this? Anyway, but provenance. So what is provenance? It even says right there, right? Who's owned it? How has it changed hands, right? And in some cases, the provenance is clean and uninteresting. You know, collector A bought it and sold it to collector B, and who sold it to collector C. Everything's legit. Everything's cool. You know, it's interesting that who owned it, but not any big story. Okay, but sometimes provenance is really kind of sketchy in the art world, right? I mean, things that were looted by the Nazis is certainly a big deal. But then other stuff like, well, has anybody ever been to the British Museum and been to London? No. All right, what's maybe one of the most famous things in the British Museum? Anything? I was going to go for the Rosetta Stone. It was a pretty big deal, right? Or the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, right? All right, so the Rosetta Stone, what's its provenance? The British dug it up in Egypt and promptly carted it off to England, right? Huh? Well, oh yeah, that's actually right with the Rosetta. No, you're right. Napoleon. Yeah. Okay. So there's quite the story there, right? And should the Rosetta Stone be in the British Museum? Probably not. Right? It's not British. It wasn't French. Go to Thomas's thing and I say view public page, then this is what it looks like. So he put in an image, okay, he's got a description, and this would be kind of like, right, some information about it. Maybe I could learn what's in and what we're going to do is we're going to use this to showcase y'all's final products, but also sort of the development process of it, okay? And in the end, we'll have a collection of all the cool stuff that you guys have made. Okay, so it's in a collection, right? You assign it to a collection. There is sort of a commenting feature. Like I could be like, this is totally awesome or whatever. Yeah, but you guys get the idea? Yeah. Okay, so one of the assignments I'm going to give you guys is to basically take either your platformer or your space game and basically make an item on Omeka for that. Just to kind of, so you guys are in the system, you're getting used to how to interface with it, what options you have, how to make stuff, and then that'll be kind of just sort of a quick thing to get started. Okay, so does that kind of make sense? And I'll put up an assignment on Canvas just to remind you guys. Gucci? Okay, so next thing to talk about is we've talked a lot about different games that you could make or different mechanics that you could make by having gone through the space shooter and the platformer. So the next sort of thing, we're going to kind of do a couple things in parallel. Next class, we're going to work on a puzzle game collectively, sort of talk it through, which we'll do tic-tac-toe. Not a particularly advanced game, but it will give us an opportunity to do a little bit of multiplayer stuff and also, or pseudo multiplayer. It also is relatively simple and therefore something that we'll redo when we get to Unreal Engine and we'll be able to see, okay, same game, exact same rules, but how we implement that and what we're able to do with the engine are two different things. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so so that's what we'll work on in class together next time. But that said, the bigger project that I'm going to turn you guys loose on is make something big and cool. Okay, but what kinds of games could you make? Right. So here's a list that the guys beforehand came up with. And I'm going to delete Flappy Bird off there. That's too easy. Right. And also, like, makes me want to stab people in the eye. Although, if the guy who came
this, but when Facebook started, you had to have a college email address to get access to it.
right, and then it expanded to the other Ivies in Boston and whatnot, and then eventually to most colleges, right? And it was very different then. It was like, yeah, me and the bros went to this party and it was awesome. And hey, I'm having a party, or let's go tailgating, or whatever, right? It was a lot of fun. And then they let everybody join it. Uh, and then it has become a toxic cesspool of, like, I don't know if you guys have ever, a good example of this would be anytime the New York Times publishes anything, the comments that are below that, or like the White House publishes something, the White House page, oh my goodness, is it a cesspool? People are terrible. So anyway, all right. So what other kind of games? So let's just go through the list they came up with, and if there's any additions, changes, would be like Zelda, Final Fantasy, Pokemon. Um, and let's take the case of, say, Pokemon, since most of you probably played that when you were kids. How did Pokemon work, the game? Like, not the card game, but yeah, like the video game. Yeah. Right. And Final Fantasy was much the same way, right? So you were in an overworld map. You walked around, you talked to people, you did stuff. But then occasionally you'd be in a battle sequence of some sort where the art would change and how the battle worked was turn based, and you were trying to throw the Pokeball to catch the thing, or you were battling the other Poke trainer or whatever. Am I getting the lingo?
Well, if you had your, I won't try to name any of the Pokemons.
What other ones were there? Yeah, and they like evolved and stuff, and all right, well, whatever. So yeah, you could make something sort of like that. Zelda, the difference there on the combat was that it wasn't there wasn't a separate mode for it. You swung your sword or whatever, um, or you could put up maybe your shield, um, and that was all real time integrated in. Okay, um, fighting games. So you know the one of those. There's several things, but yeah, the button combos. Okay. So let's say you wanted to do something like that. The very first thing you have to do is just start an experimental project and figure out how the hell the button combo thing works. And is it going to be a usable thing for a game like that? Okay. Um, so yeah. that would be the thing you add after you get it working for one character, right? So you don't try and do all this at once. Sports games, we were thinking like Madden, NBA Jam, Run and Gun. I never played that one, but does that, no? Okay. There, what would you probably use a tile map for? The get whatever size you wanted to. You could maybe say, all right, each tile, each grid was a yard or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Is there a way where you can make a tile map like, you know, like Zelda's like it's kind of like looking down instead of like horizontal. You know, is there a way to like choose that like camera view if that makes any sense?
Like, sort of like from a perspective.
Yeah, you know, like how like Mario's like kind of like horizontal, but like the Zelda's like you look down on it and stuff like that, and they can go like up and down. Stuff.
Oh, okay. So, no, yes and no, right? And when I say yes and no, what I mean is you're not changing anything about the camera. The camera
Mode, and when you look at it kind of isometric.
bet your ass you can, right? But it was designed to be 3D. Okay. So in Unreal Engine, you can do a side scroller. And in fact, there's two different modes. You can do 2D side scroller, where it's a much more glorified version of MakeCode with tile maps and stuff like that, or 3D, where even though it's 3D stuff that you're walking through, you're looking at it from a 2D perspective. Um, you don't have that kind of power. Yeah, Artie.
Does it have to be like one of those games?
Oh no, Lord no. These are just I wanted to go through the list that they came up with, and if you guys have additions or commentary or questions, then we can certainly add to this list.
So we can just like make our own. Like it doesn't have to be an actual game.
Uh,
Like based off the game.
oh yeah. Okay, so yes, you can make up your own thing, right? Probably, though, you guys are going to be sort of taking ideas from existing games and right. You've played lots of games in your life, hopefully, right? Um, so we came up with some pretty clever ideas earlier, which I'll tell you about in a minute. Okay, so sports games, puzzle game. Uh, let's maybe leave that one off the list just simply because we're going to do that collectively. Flappy Bird, too easy. Racing game. Now there's a couple of interesting ways you could do it because probably what would be your first inclination would be to do it as a top down where you're going around a track. Okay, but the 8-bit Nintendo was actually pretty capable of doing some pretty neat racing stuff. And for that, did any of you ever play Rad Racer? Hmm?
Sounds familiar.
Right, so this is on an 8-bit Nintendo, and they were able to sort of fake this perspective kind of thing. I don't know how they did it, to be honest. Um, this one, you could definitely not do this with. Um, there's no way you could do this with MakeCode. Freaking ads.
You could do ad blocker.
I could, but this game was freaking awesome. Okay, this is the first one, and that right there was one of the selling features of the Nintendo. that you could sort of do this fake perspective thing, and it was called Mode 7 graphics. Did I mention this last time? Mode 7? Okay, maybe it was in the first class that I did. Okay, so the Super Nintendo had this mode called Mode 7, where it could do sort of quasi fakey 3D stuff, which for the late 80s, early 90s was pretty advanced. And there were 3 games in particular that used this. F-Zero was one of the launch titles for the Super Nintendo, along with Mario World. But the original Star Fox used this, and the original Pilot Wings game. Does this ring a bell? No? Star Fox? Okay. Well, Star Fox was interesting because it actually, there was a second processor on the cartridge to do auxiliary computations because it was like even more advanced from a 3D perspective than this. Yeah, so this was a really amazing game because like in the early 90s, like this was like, holy crap, this is the future. Well, now look at it. We got ray traced stuff. Well, if you want to pay 3 times what it's worth, you can get ray traced stuff. No. All right. Anyway, all right. Let's go back to the list. So, racing game. Not break your head trying to figure it out. Platformers. So we already have made a platformer. I put there Metroidvania. So do you guys play Metroid or the Castlevania series? Thing or Mario style. If you want to go down that road, which is fine, I want way more stuff though that you've done in the basic tutorial, right? I want pipes, I want coins, I want all kinds of cool shit. Side scroller, we made a separate category for this because a few people mentioned like Terraria and Starbound. Anybody play those? Those also had like a crafting mechanic, sort of like Minecraft, where you could like chop down a tree, get wood, and then make something with it. Yeah. All right. Any other ideas that the other guys didn't come up with? And I'll mention some cool, silly things that we did come up with. Yeah.
Could you potentially do almost like a temple run type thing?
Elaborate.
Like run and jump over. Actually, not.
Well, that's more like a platformer, though, right?
Yeah.
So, in fact, let's in case. Well, okay. So these are 3D games. You'd have to fake it from a 2D perspective, but yes. Okay. Other ideas? Artie, what were you kind of thinking about?
I mean, I don't really know, but like kind of just like I don't know, maybe like a shooter, like of some sort, but like it has to different levels and like pick up ammo and stuff.
Okay. Would it be top down, side scroller?
Probably side scrolling.
Okay. So there, I think what you're talking is kind of like Contra. All right. Oh, look, a bank discovered honey. I'm going to take my. Is this sort of what you were thinking? Okay, now granted that this is, in a sense, that would be like combining the platformer and the space shooter, right? Because you've got a thing, you can shoot projectiles, you can get different weapons eventually, right? There's, I think with your base weapon, you don't have to worry about ammo, or maybe you do, right? Yeah, and of course this was the 80s, right? So, yeah. Okay, man, these are bringing back a lot of memories, guys. So, okay, so back to our list. What else? What other games would be inspiration for you? So we started kind of thinking about things you could do with Unreal Engine, for example, which was like Bell Heist. You could do this with MakeCode, right? You have to like sneak through the DePaul campus to get the bell, and maybe there'd be like traps and pressure plates and puzzles like you have to do like in Fallout where there's mini games like the hacking stuff, or did you guys play Deus Ex, Human Revolution, or Mankind Divided? Where there's hacking and stuff, and you can like maybe there's a security camera and you want to disable the security camera so that you can then turn off the pressure plate and get to steal the bell. And a 2D version of this probably wouldn't work very well, but like Assassin's Creed, you guys played those games, right? You know, you can almost imagine that for the bell heist, right? And you come up, there's some unsuspecting Danny and just standing there, and you come up with a knife and just, you know, to get the bell. Let's see, what else do we come up with? One thing I would suggest that you not do with MakeCode, and this is only because it's MakeCode, tower defense. Right? Perfectly great game genre. Would be a lot of fun. The problem with tower defense from the point of view of MakeCode is that there'd be too many things on the screen at once, and it just gets too bogged down and can't run fast. So, there's nothing wrong with tower defense as an idea, but let's save that one for Unreal Engine. Okay, and then we could do that like bell defense, right, where there's wave after wave of Dannies coming trying to get the bell from us, and you have to put up like beta towers and Phi-Sci towers and that shoot different things. Make sure that I'm not transmitting audio for this, but you guys know what the Phi-Sci tower would be shooting, right?
Well, probably.
Drills, Molly, GGs, joints. No. What's this here? Huh?
Call the drug king.
Yeah. And the beta tower would just shoot like a big football dude. And good bro, bro. It'd be like the cannonball tower. The defeat tower would go and just throw money. We could have a lot of fun with this, right? So, yeah, anyway, okay. So, kind of got some ideas in your head, start marinating some stuff. So what I'd like to basically spend the rest of class, and I'll kill the stream here, is just start experimenting. Like if you're thinking fighting game, load up a new project, load up the button combo thing, start figuring out how to make it work, right? Just experiment and start thinking about what you might want to try. I'll make an assignment on Canvas where you'll basically tell me what you're kind of thinking about, and then we'll go from there. Does that make sense? Gucci? All right, so we're going to kill the stream, and yeah, just start thinking. So.